morning. I had an experience I want to share with you. My wife is a school teacher, a third grade school teacher. And she had me come and speak to some of her children, all the third graders. And so she wanted me to talk about what a senator does. And I always start off with this question. And I'm going to ask you this question. Who's my boss? That's right. Well, that's part of it. My wife is, my boss at home. That's right. But someone said president? No. The governor? No. Me? I'm not my own boss? No. I'm going to tell you who's my boss. You are my boss. You are the ones that are my boss. All these people are our boss. And then we start off, and then what I do with the children is I make them all senators. So for the day, I make them all senators. And at that particular time, I said, okay, we're going to make a bill. So what would that bill be? And so one kid raised their hands, and I called on him, and I said, Senator, stand up and tell me what you would change in this school if you could change it. And he said, I'd have a longer recess. Wouldn't you like to have a longer recess in school? Yeah. So I wrote the longer recess on a piece of paper. And I held it up and I said, this is the bill. Now, we're going to do another bill. What other thing would you change in the school? Well, I called on a child, and the kid stood up and she said, I'd have an extra lunch. And I said, okay, extra lunch sounds pretty good. At that time, the principal was starting to sweat a little bit, and I told her, I said, well, of course, in the legislature, we always pass bills, but the governor can always veto it, and so can the principal. So she felt a little bit calm about that. So we had two bills, and I held it up, and I said, okay, we have two bills. You can only choose one. Which one would you do? And we had a great debate, back and forth. Longer recess, extra lunch. Longer recess, extra lunch. And then all of a sudden I called on this little kid, and he stood up, and I said, Senator, you tell the other senators, which bill are you going to pick? And he said, you know what, I'm going to pick the extra lunch. And I said, okay, Senator, now why would you want to pick the extra lunch? And he says, if I ate an extra lunch at school, I wouldn't have to go home and eat the food of my mommy and daddy's, and my brother would have something to eat. That totally just floored me. And I said to the other senators, I said, how many of you are in the same situation as this senator right here? The vast majority of them raised their hands. Now, we're talking about education reform here at the Capitol. We're talking about overcrowding of prisons. We're trying to deal with all these situations. But I had a revelation, an eye-opening experience that taught me that we can have the best teachers, we can have the best classrooms, we can have the best curriculum, but if that child is sitting in that classroom thinking about when their next meal is going to come, how are we to expect them to learn? We can continue to not face this problem, but we have to start facing this problem. So, I don't know if any of you all remember this, but I know I do, and some of the adults I bet they do, is the movie Star Wars. Have you ever seen Star Wars? You know what that is? No? Yeah, some of you seen it? Well, in Star Wars, there's this big planet, okay? And it's a Death Star, they call it, the Death Star. And this Death Star is where the evil resides. And this Death Star continues to grow day after day after day. And people will try to fire on it to destroy it, but it won't. It's protected. Except Luke Skywalker, who was the hero, figured out that there was one way of destroying this Death Star. And that is, there was this one place in the Death Star where you could drop a bomb and it would blow up. But it was well protected. So they flew their jet fighters in there, and if you remember, there was firing going on, and they flew, and all of a sudden, he dropped the bomb, and went down the shaft, and it blew up the Death Star. Well, child poverty is the very notion that I believe that if we address child poverty, we will address poor performing schools, overcrowdedness of prisons, and also the substance abuse and all these things that come after it. There's a report out by the Center for Disease Control called the ACE report, the Adverse Childhood Experience. And on this report, it shows scientifically that a child's experience dictates later on what they will become. So if we can do something early on and invest in the front end versus trying to deal with all the problems later on, we can solve a lot of the major problems that we have here today. Now I look out among you, and there's a lot of champions out there. Each and every one of these people here are here for you. And we're going to start changing hearts and minds. And we got to start with you. You have to help us, since you are our boss, you have to help us change hearts and minds. And through that, we'll have a revolution. The revolution of changing hearts and minds and putting the child first in everything we do up here. So, our children, now come on. You can do better than that. Our children, our children, our children, our children, go get them.